me, that conversation may be incompatible with saying we will not bring any non-Zionists or any pro-BDS people to come speak with us. I say this as someone who's against BDS and against and a Zionist, but I'm simply saying that so much of our language has certain hidden assumptions that I think gloss over the really hard questions.
We want to throw it out to the audience, and we want to start with at least several questions from audience members, let's say under 30.
Hi, my name is Sam Avishai. I'm a freshman at UC Berkeley, so this is a very pressing and on-topic issue. I'm just wondering, a lot of you use the word Zionist, what Zionism means to you, and if you feel that this is a time when we need to redefine what Zionism means.
For me, Zionism means a democratic Jewish state in some part of the biblical land of Israel. But I think, and that makes me a political Zionist in the tradition of Theodor Herzl, but I actually think one of the things that's interesting and emerging and will be, I think, very, very challenging to the American Jewish community in the next decade or so, if we have essentially the continued march towards a permanent one-state reality between the Mediterranean and the Jordan, and the increasing receding of the horizon of the possibility of a Palestinian state, will be more and more young American Jews will start to say, I'm actually a cultural Zionist in the tradition of Echad Ha'am, and I believe, therefore, that I can, like the people who are in the youth group Hashomer Hatzair, or like Martin Buber, and therefore I believe that I can be a Zionist and still support some kind of secular binational entity. Again, that's not my view. But that view, which has a deep pedigree in Zionist history, will gain traction precisely to the degree that Israel cannot remain a Jewish democratic state because its occupation of the West Bank becomes permanent.
For me, I identify really strongly with my Judaism through peoplehood. And so Zionism has always been a natural connection, that this is the land of my people. Which goes actually to things that you've been talking about brand identity and what that means to me as a young adult that grew up. I would say I'm the exception, not the rule, having gone to Jewish day school and having traveled to Israel as a young person, and I'd actually add to that having Holocaust survivors as grandparents, and so understanding the need for a refuge in the land of Israel, despite the fact that it may not have been in my generation. Because I grew up seeing what that did to my grandparents and then my father and down the road. So having, but something that I also struggled with as a young adult growing up in San Francisco, which celebrates multiculturalism and diversity, was dealing with how do I balance both? How do I love my people? How do I love being part of a Jewish community that is exclusive in a lot of ways, but also is part of the greater fabric of a general community? And that's, I guess that's my roundabout answer to what my Zionism is.
Anyone that knows Zionist history knows that there were great debates and discussions about it, and we shouldn't shy away from that. I want people to know who Echad Ha'am is. I want those discussions to inform. But actually, I'm going to make the case and want to draw a historic reference point, not to pre-state and state, but actually deeper in our Jewish history, and that is the destruction of the temple. Because at times I get real concern when people ask me what keeps me up at night is when our community itself, in having these kind of discussions, starts tearing each other apart and starts not just excluding people, but beating up and blaming students, young people who are asking questions, etc. There's a very well-known essay written by a guy named Jonathan Swift in 1729 called The Modest Proposal. There's a line that says, while their holy city Jerusalem was burning, the Jews were busy killing themselves. And it really is instructive, I think, in this day and age, that we figure out how we tell our children, not only that we don't plan on eating them and selling them, but that we want them deeply involved in figuring out your question that you're asking us, what is Zionism going to mean? What does it mean now that you've tasted Israel, that you've have your own opinions formed, that you want to build relationships, that you want to be a part of a vibrant community that is connected to an Israel, but it's a narrative that looks a little bit different than the movies and the books that preceded your period of time. So we want your stories, we want your insights, we want your We want you to be a part of helping develop this narrative, and I think we need to make some adjustments in how we're having this conversation in a more humane way.
Julie, I'd throw to you. I mean, on the one hand, your day job is really like, no matter what people feel about open debate, et cetera, there are clearly forces out there, and I'm sure Peter would concede it, that are not coming at Israel from a perspective of respect, love, belief in the Jewish state. They really have animus and delegitimization as their goal, and that's your frontline job, to fight that. But at the same time, you're talking about the need to allow Jewish students to sort of connect and deal with issues. They talked about Bedouins, all sorts of issues. So how does the community, how do you balance that in your job, and how should the community balance that overall? There's forces out there that are really trying to delegitimize Israel, but they're our own people who love Israel and have really tough questions, and both those things are going on at the same time.
I think that there's a lot of fear that if we do open the conversation, that we're going to lose support from the next generation. But I would argue that if we don't open the conversation, we're going to lose their support, because they want to wrestle with these ideas. They want to talk about them. They want to be challenged. In terms of policies, though, two things. First of all, I think that most of the young Americans don't know anything about Israeli politics, other than what they see on TV, or as one of my friends said, on Jon Stewart. That's probably where they get the majority of their news. And so that's one thing, it's like, how do we engage them in learning about the policies? And the second thing is, I have another friend that always says, and she's actually from Europe, that says, why do American Jews think that they can affect policy in Israel? So can we separate those two issues between debating what Israel does and trying to change their policies from this country?
And Peter, I would just flip the question to you and say, you spend a lot of time, you're focusing on Israeli government policy, kind of the establishment Jewish community, but how do you wrestle and respond with the fact that you are here talking, and you can talk about the Israeli government any way you want, but if the Prime Minister had been here, we may have had people who would come in and heckle him and disrupt, and that there's a group on the left that's not dedicated to civil debate. There's political movements that are truly, taking aim at Israel in a way, and in some ways benefiting from those who would, like yourself, who support Israel but want a big tent and open debate. How do we respond? What is the response, if any, in that direction? What do you do to counter that?
At the risk of repeating myself, I believe that when you look at the question of delegitimization and how to defeat delegitimization, and believe me, I want to defeat Israel's delegitimization as much as anyone in this room. I want Israel to remain a Jewish state for my children and grandchildren as much as anyone in this room. But where I might differ with some people is that I believe that at the core of Israel's legitimacy is the fact that it was founded as a democratic Jewish state. And delegitimization of Israel will rise in direct proportion to the degree that people believe that Israel is no longer living up to its own founding principles. That if Israel can become again a country that offers citizenship to everyone in its borders, irrespective of race, religion, sex, and ethnicity, it will not need PR firms. Because although there will still be hardcore anti-Semites and lunatics all out there, Israel will be able to pro-Israel people will be able to go into any room, debate anyone, and win. Because democracy is the language of our time. Democracy is the lingua franca of our time, as you can see even in the Arab world. If Israel makes the occupation permanent and becomes in some fundamental way not a democratic state, you can get 100 PR firms and you will gradually lose that debate, and it will more and more empower those people who believed that the creation of a Jewish state was a mistake to begin with.
Delegitimization is not a debate. Delegitimization are people who are supporting positions that will destroy the state of Israel. That is their intent. They are a network of people who are promoting the destruction of Israel, maybe for political aims, that they may have their own valid narrative and whatever to do it. It is a bad thing. It is not a debate between right and wrong. Debate between right and wrong and different views and different ways to do it, etc., can happen in a room. But the Israeli government, you know, it's not for the Israeli government to tell us which questions that we should be having in discussion with students and which ones they're allowed to ask and which policies they should change in order to have a better brand. The brand of Israel that young people will develop will come from, they have the transparency to ask all the hard questions, to criticize, to look at the Israeli human rights groups, they have that information available. They don't need the Israeli government to give them permission to ask questions about it or to challenge it, etc. Israel's a democracy, and that is the strongest thing we have against delegitimization. What we're missing, and both, I think, in the institutional world as well as from the government, is an understanding that the way in which these young people would ask questions would be difficult. How many people in the room here have some ties to the University of Michigan in some form or another? Quite a few. Last night, we gave an award to the University of Michigan Hillel, so you should all kvel. And we gave it to them about how they have been engaging their peers in such creative ways, and not just one-off programming, come have a falafel with us and come see a movie in a superficial way, or even come to a political debate. They've actually created a program there called Tamid, where they're asking people to look and invest in different aspects of Israeli society. And by the way, they are not prejudging that some of those investments may need to go to Arab towns to play for a soccer field or other municipal needs or whatever, or that there aren't real legitimate needs and concerns and discrepancies in Israeli society. But let's distinguish this. It is not the role of young people to be taking directions from any government. They're not going to. That's the worst way in the world to get people to love and develop a relationship.
I think it's important for us to remember when we talk about BDS that David Grossman supports a form of BDS, that Amos Oz supports a form of BDS, that Aleph Bet Yerushalmi, all of them have said they will not play the Ariel Cultural Center in the West Bank. And so it seems to me there is a very important need to distinguish between people who would boycott, divest, and sanction from the entire state of Israel, and people precisely because they believe in Israel as a Jewish democratic state want to distinguish between the degree to which they invest in democratic Israel and do not invest in non-democratic Israel. And if you don't allow, the Israeli government is trying hard to erase that distinction, if you look at the recent legislation. But if the American Jewish community doesn't make that distinction, then you will at some point have to explain to someone how you allow David Grossman to come to speak at your organization.
And just to clarify, nobody at Hillel is preventing Amos Oz or David Grossman or Aleph Bet Yehoshua from coming to talk.
Quite the contrary. If any of their press agents are in the room, I want them on every Hillel. I want every student to have read their novels and to be conversant in it, and that will enhance our discussion. And I am concerned, Peter, as you are. There is a challenge about the internal conversation among Israelis. That's a family conversation that's taking place, and those individuals are luminaries in Israeli society that are people who have to be a part of our narrative, and our students have to know their passions and concerns. I'm a little bit concerned if it's not somehow contextualized, a conversation that's taking place with tremendous nuance. And again, we love to think, and I suspect that there are a lot of folks in this room like myself who are, political junkies and follow every UN resolution in every aspect. That's not where most students are. That's not what is going to impact on them directly. But, to be perfectly honest, if I could get students to read David Grossman's, novel, To the Ends of the Land, that would be a great victory on many levels.
One thing that I think I notice on college campuses is the non-unity of pro-Israel groups, and I think you could actually talk to the Berkeley student over there. They have like 5 different groups on Israel. And I think a problem that maybe you could answer to address is this disunity creates voices that turn people off. And there's some Jewish extremist voice. That's one thing we're always worried about. There's this Israel Apartheid Week. Sometimes the counter-protests to that are just as extreme, and this ends up turning a lot of the school community off of both. They're just saying both of these cultures are absolutely nuts, is what they say. And it does isolate some Jewish students because they say, I don't want to be that extreme, I don't want to be ingrained in this. I'm pro-Israel, but I'm not going to even, jump into the bandwagon. I don't want to involve myself in this. So how do you guys answer to different extremists on campus that are maybe isolating other students?
I actually think there is room on campus for all voices on Israel, and I think that if Berkeley Hillel wants to have 10 groups that in some way or another engage with Israel, that's a good thing. I have no problem with that. And I think that we need to reckon in terms of extremists, all communities have extremists. And